see you're not live yet, but the streamer can hear the ambient sound in your studio right now.
Well, then if you can hear it, then I'm live.
It's just starting. I don't know if you want to mute your mic until you start. Otherwise, they're just going to hear like ambient noise of you. Yeah.
Is that better?
Doesn't really matter.
Where is it?
It's mic and aux. Yeah.
Where's the mute? Under settings?
You just click the little speaker icon there.
Oh, that. my audio. Check, check, check. Don't need that. Need that. There. Okay, my friends. Looks like I've got 4 people here right now. If you can hear me okay, let me know. If you can hear a guitar okay, let me know. It's a bit too much distortion. And tell me if you can hear. I'm going to flip over to this. If you can hear this. Oops. Just gonna pull up a backing track here, and I'd like you to tell me if you can hear it. Stop that. Excuse me. I've got 8 people here, looks like. And I need to know if you're hearing my mic okay. And my guitar. And that backing track that I played, just in case I need it. Leave me something in the chat. That's funny. If you're sending me something, I'm not getting it in the chat, which is really strange. I'm going to try something here. I'm going to try something here. Oh, yeah, I can see you in this screen. Joanne Rogers. It's not Joanne. It's Kevin. Tony's here. Could be a bit louder. Okay, let me bring the input up a bit and tell me if that sounds a bit better. Yeah, I can see you in this screen. Now I'm going to go back. Joanne Rogers. That's really weird. It's not Joanne. It's Kevin. Tony's here. Could be a bit louder. Okay, let me bring the input up a bit and tell me if that sounds a bit better. Yeah, I can see you in this screen. Now I'm going to go back. It's really weird. Joanne Rogers. But I'll use this one then. It's not Joanne. It's Kevin. Tony's here. Could be a bit louder. Okay, let me bring the input up a bit and tell me if that sounds a bit better. Yeah, I can see you in this screen. Now I'm going to go back. It's really weird. Joanne Rogers. But I'll use this one then. It's not Joanne. Oh, I might be getting an echo now. Tony's here. Could be a bit louder. Okay. Sync is out. Yeah, overdubbing. I know. I'm on two different feed screens right now because I'm trying to figure out why the chat isn't working. Okay, so I'll leave that one. My chat isn't working. Hold on, folks. I'm going to be right back and figure out what's going on there. Hold on 1 second. Okay. I think we have a bit of a fix on the chat, so I can see it. Let me see. Pull that up there. Yeah, it's in a different window. That's the strangest thing I've ever seen. There's too many people on the web. That's what it is. Customize. I'm just fiddling here a little bit. See if I can fix this. Otherwise, I won't be able to see your questions, which kind of sucks. I can see it in another window, so I can see Kevin's here, and tell me if the sync is okay now, if you're not getting that weird effect. And Tony's here, great. And Norm is here. Good to see you, Norman. He's a live student of mine. So is Kevin. Tony's too far away. But he could always do online lessons with me if he wants to. Okay, so I'm going to have to do a bit of weird windowing, going back and forth. I don't have an option. So we'll work with what we've got. Okay, once again, let's, if you guys don't mind, just confirm for me that you're hearing the mic okay, and that you're hearing the guitar okay, and good. I've got some input up, so you should be good there. That's for my mic and for the guitar at the same time. And so we're almost 10 after now, so if you guys are cool, we'll go till probably 10 after. But if you have to leave, I understand. So, yeah, right. It's okay. Awesome. All right. Well, okay, let's go with that. We're going to move forward. Welcome, everyone. Again, Steve Dempster, Dempster Guitar Studio, live for you over the interwebs. So the last few sessions, as many of you know, have been pretty heavy, dealing with a little bit of insight into how chords can be built using intervals in addition to notes. And ultimately, I was trying to suggest that using intervals is a little bit, in a way, more effective because guitars are visual and we begin to learn the shape of these intervals on the fretboard over time, just like you learn the shape of chords. And the beauty is that the shapes of the intervals, different intervals are different shapes, but those shapes, they never change. Whereas the notes that you're using change all the time dependent on the key. So yeah, so that's basically the idea. And even though most people told me it was a wee bit heavy, they actually still got some aha moments out of it. So I'm glad to hear that. But first, I hope everybody is doing well, given the amount of, I suppose, home-based seclusion we have to commit ourselves to for a while yet. And I'm hoping that because of that, at least this is helping. There are people still out there, still playing music, making music, writing music, sharing music, and it's a good thing because music makes the world go round, and we know that. So I'm happy to be a part of that process, and if this is helping, I love it. If there's anything else you'd want me to do to keep your spirits up with regards to learning this stuff, let me know. I'm always open. I have a raspy voice today, so I'm going to keep sipping my tea. Excuse me. All right. Full class tonight. Tony, do you mean I'm going to go for the full time, or do you mean there's lots of people here? Thanks for this, Steve. Oh, you're welcome. Joanna's here. Hey, Joanna. She's an older student of mine. I don't mean that she's old. I mean she was with me for a very long time, and then when she sort of finished her formal sessions, she does a few once in a while as necessary because she's a busy person between her music and all other things. So that's all good. Okay, so then because of the other sessions, I decided let's do something a little less intense. Everything in music can be heavy if you want it to, if you want to go deep into it. But likewise, you can make things a bit lighter all the time to make it light and fun for people to do. So that's what I thought we'd check out. Hey, Frank, good to see you, man. He's one of my dudes in the Strumming OS, formerly Strumming Decoded program. Thank you for being a part of that, Frank. I appreciate it. And cool. All right, well, we'll get going. We need to do a little work on blues stuff. So what I'm going to do is pull up, just to get things going here, what I guess most of you are probably very familiar with. Hey, my head's in the background. See if I can shrink that down a bit, or at least move it a bit more. Let me see. No, I'm going to leave it there. I'll just move over here a bit. So blues, isn't it an interesting framework of music, because it's in its essence it's very straightforward, typically just using 3 chords, as most of you know. And when it comes to playing its structure rather is so common that it shows up in rock, it shows up in pop, country, folk. It's such a foundational form of musical style and musical structure that it makes sense for any guitarist to get some exposure to it, even if you're not a blues listener or a wannabe blues player. But it is a very accessible style of music when people start out on the guitar, so it has its attraction for a lot of people. So anyway, that image, I'm going to come back to it in a moment, I know you're familiar with. What we're going to do today is we're going to kind of focus on a blues in the key of G. Or we'll typically say, we're going to do a blues in G. We're going to jam a blues in G. And you know me by now, I would be saying, what pops up into your mind as soon as you hear that? Well, one of the things that should pop up is that we are in the key of G. You can check out the fingering here on my fretboard. That is, of course, a G7 chord. I like to present them with their notes rather than just shape and fingerings, although both are important. What I'm doing is I'm trying to push the side of learning the guitar that most people are generally weak on. So I try to keep the notes at front of mind. That's one reason. The other is to help you, when you consistently see imagery like that, you start to make connections about where notes are located on your fretboard. So you're not engaged in this rather random approach to learning notes. The worst thing you could do would be to go, oh, that's an E, that's an F, that's F sharp, that's G. That's not going to really serve your purpose, in my opinion, because it becomes more of a verbal thing than it is an absorbing of the information thing. When you see the notes listed out in a very common way for a G7 chord, you start to slowly make relationship connections to where these notes are, in terms of the chord. And so I think that's a good thing. And if it's new to you, that's okay. It won't hurt. So that's one of the chords we're going to need in the key of G. I would like to know if anyone knows what the other two chords are going to have to be in the key of G. I'm going to go back to here, and I've got to pull up this. Does anyone else know? Yeah, it's interesting. Tony is saying that this image that I put up, I'll just get rid of the chord for a sec. I know a lot of you know this already, but that's okay. This image, a lot of people refer to it as sort of pattern 1, I guess. Tony's calling it, yeah, pentatonic box 1. Here's what it sounds like. No, sir, not F sharp major, but you are very, very close. What is Joanna said, or Joanne, Joanne, come on, Kevin, use your own name, will you? C7 and D7 are absolutely correct. Those are the other two chords we're going to need. We're in the key of G. Here's your handy dandy mnemonic device. Mnemonic device, is that what it is? I don't remember anymore. You assign the key, the chord of the key that you're in, give it to your thumb, so that's the G7, or otherwise known as the 1 chord, and then you will move to the 4 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers up, so you're always including the one you're on, so you're moving alphabetically, so G, A, B, C, hence the next chord, the 4 chord, is referred to as C7. Technically, we should be saying C dominant 7, but C7 is fine. Everybody understands what you mean. And then we need the 5 chord. Well, if that's C7, then this is D7. So the 3 chords we need to play a traditional blues, a major blues, in the key of G would be G7, C7, and D7. We're not playing them in that order necessarily. I'm just saying those are the 3 that we need. So that's good. I'm going to again come back to this image. I'm going to come back to the G7 chord. So I think most of you are familiar with that. The C7, we'll use this shape. Again, it's a bar chord. You are free if you want to use this guy. You know, it looks like a C chord with that's a B flat that's gotten added to it. Sorry. That's a C7 as well. You might be able to see certain things better, some relationships I want to talk about better, if you use this one, because then everything's kind of concentrated in and within, in and around that thing. And then the final chord is D7, and I'm using this guy. So again, this isn't a bar chord, this one. This one looks like the shape of a C7 chord. You're just moving it up 2 frets. And I'm not hitting the outside E strings because they're not part of the chord. Not only am I not hitting them with my pick, I'm very focused on going from the 5th string to the 2nd string. But should I hit the outside strings, which I don't want to hear, it might be hard to tell from here, but that 3rd finger is not only playing its note, but it's gently touching the underside from underneath the string with the tip of the finger. So it gets it muted out. So if I happen to hit that, this is just some technique stuff for you to be aware of. if I hit that, in general, you're not going to hear it. And I'm not trying to focus on it, so I'm going to try to come in at the 5th string. Do that. With regards to the 1st string, my index finger is nicely sitting right against the note it's playing, but it's leaning a little bit. I know it's a bit hard to see. Let's see if I can show you here. So there's the note, but it's leaning back this way, just enough to touch that 1st string and mute it out. So again, if for some reason I happen to hit all 6 strings, you're only going to hear the ones I want you to hear. If the 3rd finger touching the underside of the 6th string is a bit too subtle for you, a lot of people just use their thumb. They just bring it over top, and as soon as they touch the string, that's sufficient. You don't want to put pressure on it because you'll actually make a note unless you want to make a note with your thumb. Lots of people do that too. I never got really good at it. It's not my style. John Mayer uses it a lot. I think even Dave Matthews does it quite a bit. And of course, Jimi Hendrix was well known for using that when he was making his major chords very often. And that allowed him to come up with the technique that he had for that kind of hammer-on pull-off effect that you can't do when you have it barred grabbing that note. So it's a very effective technique. I just never got used to it. So so there's the D7, and I should have moved it over, but there it is nonetheless. So you have those in your head. Okay, point number 1. We need G7, we need C7, we need D7. Look, there's the thumb, I just did it. I'm not playing a note though, it's just muted. I can do it that way just as easily. It's okay. Cool. We also need, where are you again? This guy. Now the numbers, of course, refer to the fingerings. I will tell you something about the 1st string, the top one on the image. In theory, when you're practicing the thing, it's often the case that potentially for the 2nd and the 1st string, from a practical point of view, people will tend not to use their pinky. They will tend to use their 3rd finger because they want to get some juice out of it, right? It's hard to do that with the pinky, although I'm quite comfortable with it. You can see, it's a weird thing. It's just a habit I developed. I use 4 fingers when I'm doing that, and I want to come back to this index. I've just gotten used to that. But most people don't do that. They'll use their 3rd finger because it is a stronger finger. But for me, I always felt weird having, because my hand isn't as big as some other people's hands, I have to do the bend, come away from it, and then leap to that note. Whereas when I do it with my pinky, it's all part of one big motion to me in my mind. So you just have to pick and choose. So I've seen lots of people on the low end of the scale, they'll use their pinky. That's fine. And then as they get up here, they use their 3rd finger. It's up to you what you want to do, whatever feels most comfortable. So that's the fingering for the scale, and it's a very familiar shape, and we get a lot of juice out of that guy. That one is called G minor pentatonic. Referencing Tony's thing about box number 1, I don't talk of these things in terms of boxes. I know that's a common approach to describing it. I'm a bit of a fan of the cage system, and if you're familiar with it, that's fine. And some people hate it to death. Some people love it. That doesn't matter. Everything is useful to learn should you want to engage in it. Certain styles of music will not want to use caged. A lot of metal people don't like to use caged. Metal players, not metal people. And so, but that's neither here nor there. So my point here is that I don't reference this as box 1 or anything. To me, it's pattern number 4. Because the octave orientation within it, this is going to come in handy as we play a bit. The octave orientation in it is based on the open string E chord. I'm not going to describe Cage to you tonight, but that's where it's coming from. If you want more information, tell me to do something on Cage, then I'll be happy to do it. We are working in 1-4-5. Yes, we are. It sounds simple until you come to try it. It's true for everything, Tony. It's just the way it is. It's true for everything. You're absolutely right. So I'm going to keep that one up there. Good. Now I'm going to show you a different version of this same scale that I think you do need to know. The fingering is the fingering. You know, you can really be very creative with how you want to use it. But it doesn't matter how you ultimately finger it. What you want to be able to do is make sure that you understand how the notes relate to each other fundamentally. For our purpose today, I'm not going to get into it. I said we're just going to do something light. So I just want you to have a bit of an awareness of what the notes are that are under your fingers as you play it. Even though you've put your finger into the 6th fret, your pinky into the 6th fret probably a million times in your life, are you, that seems a bit like it's overloading, are you reminding yourself that it's a B flat? That's the real key. G, B flat, C, D, F, G, B flat, C, D, F, G, B flat. Not just this shape, not just this finger pattern, but these notes. B flat, G, F, D, C, B flat, G, F, D, C, B flat, G. Yes, you have to be as good going forward in the alphabet and backwards. It's a craft, it's a skill, and you don't get it just because you know about it, you get it because you work on it. It's true for everyone. Okay, so the other thing that we need, and I didn't do a chart for this, and I just simply forgot. So if you guys ultimately want these images, as I go through more of them, I will make a point of putting together a little PDF for you with all these charts in there, and I'll make sure that there's this other one that's missing, which is basically the 12-bar blues form. In a nutshell, the easiest version, the simplest version of it would be this. So I'm just going to verbally describe this to you. You would have 4 measures of the G7 chord. Not 4 strums, not 4 beats. I'm talking about measures or bars. You have 4 measures of G7. You can imagine those 4 measures as one line of music. And we're going to need 12 of them altogether. So there's 4 there. And then you're going to go to the C7, which is the 4 chord in the key of G, sort of. I'm not going to go into it tonight. I'll just leave you with the thought that when you are playing the G's, when you are playing a traditional blues, every chord you're on, every dominant chord you're on, is a chord from its own key. So even though we say we're in the key of G, which is a shorthand way of saying it, when I'm in the key of G and I'm playing the G chord, in truth, I'm in the key of C. And when I go to C7, in truth, I'm in the key of F. So this is actually the key of C. This is in the key of F. And then D7 is the only actual chord that's in the key of G. If that really messes with your brain, don't think on it too much. For the time being, you're just going to think of these three chords as being in the key of G for the sake of playing. I'm just telling you there's more to it than you've been told, and more to it than meets the eye. So let me play a 12-bar blues using those three chords. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to put on my headphones because I'm going to try out using a backing track that I created. Just a simple shuffle, swing, feel backing track. Hopefully you can hear it. I can see that it's being fed through the system, but I want it to be comfortably heard by you. So I'm going to see if I can bring that up. Whoops, get that one. Let's put that there. Let's put that there. Oh yes, I see it now. Hold on. There's a lot of screen stuff I have to shuffle around here to get at it. There we go. Okay. I'm going to put this on. Let me know if you can hear the backing track okay. Okay, so I have to flip over here. And of course, we're dealing with always this silly ongoing delay. Tony says it's good. Okay, I'm just going to go with that. See how it sounds. And I just want to play, I'm going to strum through those four chords to give you a better sense of how it plays itself out. So let me bring it back. Here we go. I made a switch there, don't worry. Fifth measure, sixth measure, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so that's the structure of it. That's what we need to be able to do. So if I just play that on my own, it just sounds like this, using these big bar-y type chords. 1, 2, 3, 4. Second measure, third, fourth, fifth, C7 chord. D7, C7, just that. Pull that in. I need to see any weird, happy comments. Where'd they go? There they are. Can you do turnaround, please? Sure. Tony would like me to do a turnaround. How's that? Oh, silly me. Not interested in the turnarounds right away. We can get to them potentially a little later. But it's interesting to know when they happen, why they happen, what the purpose is. And then when you're good at that, you know, it's easier to actually come up with your own turnarounds and such. I played the turnaround. I just did it with the chords. That's all. I didn't do anything. I didn't do, you know, one of these things, right, where you're. I didn't do any of that. That's okay. We're not focused on that tonight, Tony. We're focused on the structure, the chords, and ultimately a little bit of soloing on it. Okay, so we've got the chords under play, and I'm just going to assume that you've got the minor pentatonic under control as well. I hope, anyway. So let me pull up again. Cue this up. Now that I know you can hear the track okay. Haha. Thanks. I appreciate it. Let me go back. And I'm going to play it again. Now what I'm going to do is what I think most people do when they take up, when they have the knowledge that, okay, I've got these three chords. Try to keep my head out of the image. I've got these three chords, and I've got this scale that I can mess around with and do some cool things with. And of course, you can pick up all kinds of licks and such all over the place, from the interwebs, from DVDs, from other people. But licks are nothing more than stuff that other people made up. You can make them up just as easily. So I'm not so concerned about that. I'm just concerned about how you're going to play using that scale over those chords. So here's what I think the majority of people probably do when they start to jam over those three chords using the G minor pentatonic scale. Whoop, hold on a second. I always have to put my headphones on so I can hear the backing track. There we go. Okay, here I go. Something like that. As opposed to something like this. I must stop there because I think the first time that I did it, I went directly to A minor pentatonic. Silly me. I'm going to go back and do it in G. Hold on. I was just in a bad frame of mind. G minor pentatonic. Now, of the two, forget the fact that I played the first one in A minor. Some of the notes were right, but I just wasn't thinking straight. And the second one in the proper key. But regardless, if you heard the first one and you compared it to the second one, how it was played, which of the two did you prefer? I have to bring this up again. You've been listening to me then. Yeah. You know, A minor pentatonic is such a common go-to location on the fretboard. You just go to it. You don't even think about it. Like me. This is what happens when you're strapped up in the house all day, right? But I think what you'd be able to notice, I'll just keep the headphones on because I'm going to play a bit, is that the first one kind of had a don't know where I'm going kind of feeling to it. Let's do it. Yeah, I agree. Second one sounds better. Here's the first one. You know, it has the quality, everyone talks about chord tone soloing, also the phrasing of the notes. Chord tone soloing is another step above what I'm talking about, and then even above the chord tone soloing, specific chord tones are what you want to try to target ultimately as you're leaving from one chord to the next. We could certainly talk about that, Frank. I didn't plan on it for this session because I'm kind of assuming people are at a more starting state of getting this stuff underway. But you're absolutely right. Chord tone soloing is a much more challenging skill because you actually have to be aware of the notes that make up the chord. Gee, I wonder who's been saying that forever. Know your notes. Not only the notes that make up the chord, which kind of relates to the last two sessions we just did, but also where they're located on the fretboard. So if you can play a G7 chord, I'll digress just for a moment to let people know what Frank is referring to. If you can play a G7 chord, absolutely great. If you can play the arpeggio of a G7 chord, you're getting one step closer to being able to do some chord soloing. So you want to be able to do this, and then you want to be able to do this. So all I did is I played the notes that exist in that chord. And by the way, if I said to you right now, what are they? What are the notes that are in the chord? Hopefully you're going to go G, B, D, and F. Boom. So that's what I'm playing. G, B, D, F. G, B, D, F, G, B, D, F. It's the notes that make everything make sense. I think people believe me, but I just don't want to work on it. I don't get it. I mean, it doesn't, anyway. So, yeah, and so once you have that stuff in place, you're able to do some soloing by targeting those chord tone notes specifically as within the chord during the time it plays, and then when the new chord comes around, you have to be able to do that. You can almost hear the progression. You can hear the unfolding of the chords without actually strumming the chords, which is a really cool effect. So I won't be touching that tonight. I'm not saying I could tell you what the chord is being played. That's okay, man. But in order to do that technique, chord tone soloing, it sounds mysterious and whatever, but you don't want to solo only using chord tones because then you're just going to sound real chintzy. So you have to have a mixture of things going on, but all of these tools, know the minor pentatonic or the major pentatonic notes, know the notes of the chords that are going by, know the notes. I mean, know them, know how they relate to the key. And then all of these techniques that you guys keep hearing about from this person, that person, whatever, it makes a ton more sense than just being told, let's do some chord tone soloing. And what you'll still get is a dot diagram of the picture. Because in truth, in order to do chord tone soloing really well, you still have to know that this is the 1, this is the 3, that's the 5, that's the flat 7, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 1, because you're going to want to be targeting certain of those intervals to emphasize the chord. And people do this all the time, and when the audience hears it, they don't think anything of it. To them, their ears are just saying, oh yes, that makes sense, sort of. They're not articulating that, but they're not uncomfortable with what they're hearing. And that's only because the person who's playing knows what they're doing. You can do it by ear to a certain extent. Some people rely on that a lot, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the other approach is to be aware of the notes and the arpeggios, and blending all of that information together. Okay. What about 2 passing blue? Yeah, don't worry, man. You're getting all ahead of me. You guys, relax. You're all ahead of me. I'm getting there. I think that's the difference. If you go to any of my YouTube videos, I have said time and time again, I cannot make a video that's less than 20 minutes long. And more often than not, they're closer to 30 and 40 minutes for one video. Now, in the world of YouTube, at least historically, that's been not a good idea, because people want their information real fast right now. And I get it. That's the YouTube universe. I can't do it. I'm an explainer. I'm a teacher. I think I do it well. I think I can break things down and give perspectives about how things work well, and that just can't happen fast. So I'm getting there. Don't worry, my friend. Okay. So I'm going to come back to the backing track here, and I'm going to play a little bit more, and I'm going to add some extra stuff to it. I'm going to just push this over here, right down there. I'm going to put some other stuff into it. Tell me what you think I'm doing. So I threw in some extra technique there. So it's one thing to know this. Excuse me. It's one to know that, one thing to know that. It's another thing to know, what do I do with it? Well, one thing you do with it, as I've always said, is you gotta sit with it and go and play in the sandbox. You gotta play in the sandbox. You got to sit at home with either, in these days you could do a YouTube backing track with nothing but a basic 12-bar blues in G. And you could play around with this thing. I think people have actually lost the ability sometimes just to innocently play. They always have to have always a goal in mind, and goals are important. But there's a place where you just go and play, and there's nothing you're trying to get out of it. And what will happen is these little magical moments start to occur where you get this little burst of insight that's only yours. It's nothing I said, it's nothing anybody else showed you. It's your insight about some aspect of this thing. And I'm going to move this because I just don't like the, I can I do it over there? No, okay. Um, and that's where the real joy comes, when you're making some connections based on the way you're thinking about how this works. So what I did in that particular scale, a whole bunch of technique. And this is not a technique session. This is just an overview of playing some blues. So obviously at the beginning I did a bend. And you know, there's all technique to that, but a bend is a usable tool. And if you're not used to it, if you're not used to doing it, then you've got to get used to doing it. Simple. So it's about making this thing a bit more real world when you start to put in bends. Bends are getting you closer to a singing quality of playing guitar, a vocal quality that someone has. Now there are certain places in the scale that make a bit more sense to start doing bending, and other spots that are a little harder. But ultimately it all gets explored, and you should experiment, and you'll probably find that when you are bending, unless you have a specific note in mind, which you should, you're probably going to make things sound to our ears out of tune. And there's a place for that as well. I'm not saying everything has to be pitch perfect. It shouldn't be in blues. There's a wide range of what's acceptable, which is fortunate for us. But generally, when you're practicing bending, if I were to play the C note on the scale and bend up to the next note in the actual scale, so I'm going from a C to a D, when I land on that C and I want to bend it, for now, for my purpose, I want to make sure that I get the sound of a C to a D. I don't want, if this is what I want, and I get this, just a little flat, it could work. If you go too sharp, it really sounds crummy. So this is where, in the act of learning to do some bending, you have to learn to control what it is you're bending to, or even why you're bending. Some of it can be intuitive at the moment, other times it's well thought out. So that's one aspect. Okay, I'm going to add an extra layer now to what's possible. For those of you that are somewhat familiar with the minor pentatonic, in and of itself, it tends not to have as bluesy a sound as it could. And again, what I'm about to show you is a vocal technique. What we're trying to do is emulate the sound of a singer through the way we manipulate the strings. And this is when you start to hear things like this. So what happened there is this. I'm going to get rid of this guy, and I want to get that guy up. So as you can see, it's still minor pentatonic in its architecture, but then the same note has been added in two different locations. A lot of people seem to think two extra notes are added to this. No, it's the same note, just an octave apart. And we often reference it as the flatted fifth or the flat five. Where's that coming from, Steve? If you knew your major scale, you wouldn't be asking me the question, but I'll help you out with it. The minor pentatonic as a scale ultimately comes from the natural minor scale. we haven't covered in any of these live sessions yet. If you pull out from that 7-note natural minor scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you've reached an octave. If you pull out the second note, which is the B, keep the A, keep the G, keep the G, lose the A, keep the C, keep the D, keep the C, keep the D, lose the F. What am I talking about here? Yes. Keep the D, G, B, C, E flat, G, A, B flat, C. My brain is not working today. C, D, E flat. What I meant to say is ditch the E flat, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th note of the scale, and then you keep the 7, and then you're back to the octave. So you're taking the natural minor and you're pulling away from it the 2nd note and the 6th note. And what you're left with is the minor pentatonic scale. Now, what I said was that the pentatonic derived ultimately from the natural minor, and the natural minor ultimately came from the major scale. That's why you should know your major scale really well. But for the time being, when you eliminate those notes, you get the pentatonic sound, which makes it good. Now, what we're doing is we're flattening the 5th of the scale. Now, if you counted up 5 notes from that beginning point of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and your brain said, take that and flatten it, you wouldn't be right. Because the flatted 5th reference, some people refer to this as the blue note, that's why I put them in blue there, the D flat note. It isn't coming from a statement about the minor pentatonic. It's coming from a statement about the major scale, or in some cases, the natural minor, because those two are tightly related. So it's this thing. Check this out. If I go G minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do it again to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I land on the note D. That's where the 5th is in relation to the lower G. That's your power chord. If you take the D and flatten it, that's where the flat 5th is coming from. That's why it's called a flatted 5, a flatted 5th. It's the interval of a 5th. Again, you get used to seeing this kind of stuff. We talked about this in the last 2 issues. And then you just do what you're told. Oh, it's a minor pentatonic scale with a flat 5. So you play it in relation to your G, and you find the 5th, and you flatten it. Anyway, the point here is that it sounds more vocal when you add it in. It sounds like a cool singer. So I add it again there on the 3rd string. That's at the 6th fret. It's the same note. It's like the opening to Jimi Hendrix. Da-da-da-da. Purple Haze. So that's where that reference is coming from. Now that you know that, you can throw that into the mix. Now, how you do it will always matter. If you just do stuff like this, although you're hitting all the right notes, it doesn't sound bluesy. So playing blues has more to do with the tools of expression that you use while you're playing that scale. How's my time? Okay, it's just 6 now. While you're playing that scale. So what I'm going to suggest to you is, if you're comfortable with techniques such as hammer-ons and pull-offs, and I'm sure most of you have been exposed to them at some point, and you're comfortable with slides, either sliding up or sliding down. I'll give you an example. So here's a hammer-on from the G to the B flat. Okay, pick once. Solid hammer-on to the B flat. Has to be a quick approach in order to have enough momentum to activate the note that's in that fret. If you come in too slow, you barely get the note. It has to be like your fingers being held back by somebody and you're just ready to fire it off. It's that kind of effect. Okay, so that's a hammer-on. For the pull-off, that people call it, it's just the reverse, but really it isn't, because to do a pull-off, in most cases, you have to have both fingers in question. I want to pull away from this one and activate that one. So I play the high note first. And then pluck the string to activate the low one. It might be a bit easier to activate it here, so because there's space to move your finger. I'm literally plucking the string with the pinky. You're not lifting the pinky away. That's not a pull-off. It's why I sometimes call them, and you have to be careful with this, pluck-offs. Pluck, plosive, pluck off. You have to technically be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with hammer-ons. And sliding. You don't have to pick from one note to the other all the time. You can slide. However you want to handle it. And then you, through experience, you integrate that. You go into the sandbox and you do that. I am throwing other things in there that are coming out just because they come out. That's what happens over time. They jump out intuitively, but they were worked on at some point. So what I would recommend is when you get to the third string and you want to play the flat 5 above it at the 5th fret, going from the 5th to the 6th fret, that would be a great opportunity to practice your bending. Because it doesn't take a lot of bend to get that note. That's a semitone bend. That sounds just by itself, that's just bluesy, right? How you bend, the technique of bending, we haven't talked about. There is a technique to it. My hand is doing certain things. I'm not just taking this finger and going, it's too hard. You can even reverse it. Didn't there we go. You get the idea. Okay. What I'm going to do now is put up that backing track, and I'm going to throw in some of these blue notes. And you tell me if it sounds kind of bluesy to you. So let me cue up the track here. kind of idea. Instantly, it starts to sound a bit more bluesy. But you really have to go on a bit of a journey into that sandbox, and you got to sit with this thing and learn to integrate these techniques into that scale. How you come into certain places to bend, how you leave the bend. Some of these things can be demonstrated through specific licks, but I find it just way more important to explore. Push some sand around, see what happens, and you will discover that certain sounds are very appealing to you. And when you discover them on your own, they stick better. They really do. That you feel like it's coming from you instead of you trying to play somebody else's lick all the time and feeling frustrated that it's not happening the right way. I hope that makes a bit of sense. Okay, I'm gonna pull up the questions again and see if anything has been happening. Everyone talk. Yeah, I got that. Not saying. Okay, I got that. What about two passing blue notes with the pentatonic? What about the two passing blue notes within the pentatonic? Well, I think we're talking about the same thing, unless, are you talking about this? Or like two notes that take you through take you through it, Tony? Or are you talking about the fact that there are two notes that exist within it? So that's you emulating a singer. It's that sort of thing. That's what we're trying to do. It's very much a vocal type technique. Can't really do that on a piano. Oh well. Okay, I want to just push this a little bit further, not for you to go away and start working on it, because it starts to get a little bit detailed. I like the detail. It's fun to work on, but you should really only do it once you've got some mastery on the earlier stuff. So I just want to briefly go over something with you. When you play a G7 chord, this relates to the comment I had at the opening, followed by a C7, followed by a D7, in true harmonic form, this is actually not the one chord in the key of G. G major is the one chord in the key of G, but G dominant 7, or G7, is the 5 chord. It's the 5th chord in another key. And I know you might be scratching your head, but if you were to analyze chord construction on every note of a C major scale, not G major, C major, you would realize that the chord that comes off of the C note would be C major. The chord that comes off of a D note would be D minor, etc. E minor, F major, G major. And very often that G major chord, if you extended all the chords from basic triads, some of this language you should be getting used to by now, and you extended them from triads to 7th chords, the 5 chord in the key of C is G7. And in every major scale, there's only one dominant 7 chord. So when you see them, in and of themselves, they sound fine when you stick them together, but they're not really from the key. This one is not from the key of G. This comes from the key of C. Okay, if that didn't hurt your brain enough, what that means is you have another scale that you can use to play over the G7 chord that gives it the flavor of the G7 chord. It's not really a chord tone soloing thing. It's a scale. We're just going to keep it that way. Some people will reference it as a mode. I don't want to confuse you. But if you played the notes of C major, what are they? This is where you have to do some thinking. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. No sharps, no flats. I play those notes, but I don't start on a C note. I'm going to start on the G note, and I'm going to play through to the next G. So I have G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now that F sounds interesting if I'm starting things from G. Listen to what it sounds like. Most of it looks like a G major scale, except for that note. Here's what G major sounds like. For those of you that are in the know, G major has one sharp in it, and that's F sharp. But I'm not playing F sharps. I'm playing an F natural. And the only reason I'm doing that, starting from G and playing through to the next G, is because I'm actually in the key of C. You don't have to start on a C note to be in the key of C. You just have to play the resources of the key of C, which is what I'm doing. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's all I'm doing. The whole time I was in the key of C. But when I started on G, we have a funny name for this thing. It's still a C major bunch of notes, but its sound is something we call Mixolydian. Now you can write home about that if you want to. Here's the point. Over the G7 chord, I want to pull this up. And do I have it here? I do. I'm going to pull this up. And I can move that. Oh, there it is. Oops, sorry. Look at this. You can do this for each of the chords in the blues, but I'm only going to do it for one because we're over time already. G7 is the chord. There you go. Now I've just wrecked your brain cells a bit, telling you that although we're saying we're in the key of G, we're not actually. Not until we play a D7 chord. When you play that G7 chord, you're actually, for the time you're on it, you're in the key of C. Now, what I just played was a version of the key of C, but starting on the G note, and that's the second image that you see. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's not G major you're looking at, folks. It's G something else because you're in the key of C. And that's something else. It's just a funky word called Mixolydian. It comes from way back in Greek history or something like that. The word is not that important. What's important is, keep doing that, hold on. What's important, I'm going to pull this over, there we go. If you look at the notes in the G major 7 chord, G dominant chord, they are exactly inside of that G Mixolydian scale. And they are listed in blue. So if you compare the notes of the chord you're playing to the notes in that particular scale, that means that when you hear G7 in your blues, you could use that scale. Why would you do it? Because everybody uses the pentatonic, so everybody sounds the same. And if you want to sound the same as everybody, go for it. You can do that. But the beauty here is you have a second option, and it doesn't sound like a pentatonic at all. It sounds more major. And it fits with the sound of the chord very tightly. And you can repeat the same process for C7, which I won't go into. It's another key, which can be interpreted as the key of F, and the 5 chord in the key of F, F, G, A, B, C, is C7. So you can play C mixolydian. It's very similar in shape. And you can do the same thing with D7. So my point here is, if you want to get away ultimately from the pentatonic sound, and you will eventually, I mean, you just can't stay on that all the time, because you'll get bored with the sounds you're producing. You need some fresh stuff to keep you moving forward. I put this up to let you know there's a whole other world of possibility beyond just minor pentatonic. But minor pentatonic is what people go to at the beginning. Your job as the player is to start taking some tools. The flat 5 is one of the tools. Bending, sliding, hammer-ons, pull-offs, and most importantly, I didn't mention this, and then we'll open up some questions if you want. Let me play against the backing track for you 2 ways, and you tell me which one, again, you think is nicer to your ears. Listen to this. Okay, that one, or this one. I'm going to bet you're going to say number 2. What's the difference? I usually describe the first one as basically a run-on sentence. You're hitting all the right notes, but you're not thinking or playing like a musician. What you want to do with this scale, and this will make you sound immediately professional in your playing, play as if your ability to play the guitar requires a breath, requires a connection to your breath. Think of what trumpet players or flute players, any wind instrument has to do. They have to take a breath, and then they play a series of notes, and at the end of that series, they have to take another breath. So we use that quality, what we call phrasing. We use that in the construction of our lines or our licks, whatever it is we're playing. So you must try to imagine that you have to kind of take a breath. Put some space in between a bunch of notes. Don't feel compelled to fill it with sound all the time. Silence is good. So, you know, no. That's fine. Do it again. Versus just an onslaught of notes. So that feature is phrasing. When you begin to phrase that minor pentatonic, no matter whether you're using the blues scale, which includes the flat 5, or that newer stuff I just showed you, which you don't have a chance to work on yet, Mixolydian stuff, anything you're playing when you're soloing over the chord progression, when you begin to phrase things, instantly you sound more professional in your playing. You're thinking like a musician. And you're thinking like a human who plays music. And even the human voice requires you to take a breath. So the fact that we can play endlessly on this, and our breath, in a sense, is not directly connected to it, we can get away with it. But you mustn't do that. When people interpret your playing as like an ongoing, never-ending onslaught of stuff, they may be technically impressed by what you're doing. But musically, they're not going home singing that to themselves because they can't. There's nothing they can sink their teeth into and relate to. Think of it like a conversation. Here's somebody asking you a question, and then here's your answer. Here's another question, and here's your answer. That sort of back and forth in your playing will help you tremendously. So let me go back here and check out, where are you? Oh, now you're not there. Oh, there you are. Your singing is just like my playing. Oh man, you're telling me I'm bad, are you? Getting used to understanding is another thing. Yeah, you're right. Modes for another day. Yeah, I don't even like to use the word for a long time. People get too weirdly confused by modes. But the shorthand answer to what they are is just any major scale you play, just start it on another note of the scale, and go to the next note an octave higher. It's a different sound. That's the mode. More specifically, the mode is really in relation, the sound you're producing with your scale in relation to the chord that's in the background. So it's a big topic. I don't like to get caught up with it. You never hear cellists walking around among each other saying, hey man, what mode are you playing? It's a guitar thing, and let's leave it just leave it for the time being. It's too confusing for so many people. And yet the concept is not at all confusing, but the banter and the talk and the posturing that goes on. Hey man, do you know your modes? Check out this Aeolian thing. It's just words. I'm not interested in that. So yes, modes for another day. Oh yeah, make it sound so good. Second, good points. I never liked hearing soloists who played a million. Yeah, nor I, Frank. I mean, there's a place to do it. It's fun to rip stuff up real fast, to maybe momentarily demonstrate the level of skill you have. But fundamentally, no, I don't want to do that. Fundamentally, people who do nothing but play fast and shred fast all the time. I'm not talking about really fine players do shred and they do it tastefully. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those that are unaware of how it should be used, which is they do it all the time. It becomes the measure of their guitaring ability. That's like, for me, that's like saying the faster you talk, the better communicator you are. People generally don't practice trying to talk fast. They just talk at a normal, relaxed human pace. And if I play at that pace, I think I connect better with more people. Once in a while, I'll throw in a little bit, and then I'll come back to the main thing. But fundamentally, I'm not trying to be an auctioneer on my fretboard. Yeah, take 45, 55, 65, 75, 45. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how they do it. But I don't value it. It's impressive, but I'm not striving to become it. Tony, yes, call and response. That's what I was talking about. That's the idea. Excellent, excellent. So, there's a little thing of blues for you to sink your teeth into, some perspectives. Covered a lot of territory already. That minor pentatonic comes from the natural minor scale, which comes from the major scale. So I can backtrack everything back to the major scale. And if you're not comfortable with the notes that are in it in particular keys and the interval formula structure, then when you get introduced to a new scale, which will be the formula of which will be presented to you in terms of the major scale, you'll be lost. You'll just take it on faith. Oh, it's 1 3 1 flat 3 1 2 flat 3 4 sharp 5 flat 6. It's a mess, and you're just going to memorize it, and you don't know anything about it. I don't think that's a good idea, and too many players are thinking this way, and I'm trying to change it. I had one student, this was many years ago, he was comfortable playing a variety of different pentatonic shapes up and down the fretboard, but he referred to them as the blue shape, the green shape, the whatever, I forget what colors he used. So whatever he read or was introduced to, his brain made a connection that this is the blue shape, let's say. It isn't. There's nothing, there's no color in and of itself to the shape of the thing. The shape is a result of the location of notes. Hence, when you play the same scale, here's A minor, with our friendly, very familiar one. Here's the same scale played, but it looks different. Here it is again. Sorry. Here it is again. 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 And again. That's our friend a whole octave higher. Nope. Tony says, I think all these modes come from the old Spanish guitar players of many years ago. I think I checked with my mate, Google. I wouldn't say so. The further back you go, like if you go really far back, some discussion of modal thinking is there, and it was very much not Spanish guitar player based. It was very vocally based. In fact, a lot of it came out of monasteries with monk singing and learning how to harmonize between voices. There's a whole history to it, but fundamentally, in the common period right now, guitarists took up this whole new idea of modes again. It's always been around, not as refined perhaps as it is now, but guitarists have taken it on as almost a mythical kind of thing that you have to go to a unique island and study with somebody to really get a handle on the whole thing. So it's a new idea for guitar. It's not a new idea for guitarists, but it's an idea that only guitarists seem to talk so much about, right? I mean, again, if you got a crowd of violinists together, they're not asking what mode you played that in. They just want to know what key you're in, and then they'll take it from there. If you happen to be playing a mode, that's fine. But they're not going to have this crazy, weird discussion about does the violinist know his or her modes, or the clarinet player, or the tuba player, or whoever. It's a guitar thing, and it's become almost a rite of passage. I find it quite silly. You're playing modes whether you know it or not. It's a fancy name for playing the scales, the major scale or any scale for that matter. Any scale because of the number of notes that make it up. If you turn it around upside down, you've got a mode of it. And it produces a different sound. And yes, it's very creative. You can do a lot of stuff with it. But there's been an overemphasis, I think, on sandbagging people. I said it. Sandbagging people into thinking, oh, I got to know my modes, man. That's part of being a guitar player. Nope. Doesn't have to be at all. Not in the least. Not like me. No, I'm not saying you're wrong, brother. I'm just saying my understanding of it doesn't come from Spanish guitar. In fact, when I think of Spanish guitar, I also think classical guitar. I was trained on classical guitar. Modal thinking is there, but it's not as heavily emphasized as it is in contemporary guitar, popular style guitar. Modal thinking is a thing that seems to sit better with instrumental guitarists, rock players, fusion players, jazz players, that kind of crowd. Folk people, folk guitarists don't tend to talk about modes. Country players don't tend to talk about modes. And overall, classical players don't tend to talk about them, even though they're familiar with them. But it's very much it's a metal thing, it's a death metal thing, it's a fusion thing, it's a, that. I don't know how else to put it. So anyway, I hope you had a chance anyway to play along with that backing track. I didn't set it up for you to be able to do it, but once again, if you want me to put together these charts and include the backing track, I can put that together for you and make it available. You just have to send me an email, let me know, or you can private message me on the Facebook page for Dempster Guitar Studio, and I'd be happy to do that. It's not done yet. It's not like it's ready to go. I'd have to put it together for you. So anyway, any other questions, insights? So really what I did is I just wanted to do an overview of blues, 3 chords. I didn't even touch minor blues. Maybe we should do that on Monday. We did major blues this day. We could do minor blues on Monday, which I think a lot of people like more. It has a cooler sound, It's just a very cool kind of flavor to it. So, all right, sandbagging, back in the pit again. Sandbagging is a term I came across. I don't know if it actually applies to this, where somebody's trying to is trying to pull the wool over your eyes, basically. I don't know why sandbagging would work as a reference to it, but they're trying to, throw you off, make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about, when in fact you could very well know what you're talking about. So it's just one of those things. If there are other questions, throw them at me. I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will be back again on Monday. And in the meantime, as the weekend unfolds, let's keep our minds focused on diminishing the presence of Mr. COVID, get back to normal, and start being around our people, our peeps again, because I know it's hard for everyone. But C7, not so much. That's an interesting thought. I would have thought the other way around, Kevin, even though I see Joanne. How to remember all this stuff? Well, you can't. I'm not expecting you to remember it. But what will happen is some chunk of it will probably grab your attention. And then what you do is say, hey, Steve, on that session you did, which was great, by the way, this little piece that you talked about, that really stuck with me. Can we expand that? Can we do some more with that? And that's how you do it. And you build up this repeating process of that little piece interested me. Let me go with that for a bit. And this little piece interests me. Let me go with that. You're not trying to remember it all. You can't. What you do have to do ultimately though is just, if you want to play blues, you have to play. You can't just think on it like we're doing here. You have to get out and play. I don't mean out professionally, just get and play. And then link up with people who are ideally doing the same thing. And I'm telling you right now, somebody will lean over to you and say, hey, Frank, try this. Hey, Tony, try this. And you incorporate that into your playing, and all of a sudden, boom, you've added a new element, and you just grow that way. That's how it works. It's not like reading a chapter in a textbook and expected to regurgitate it all. It isn't that. But like I said, music is a big topic. We could take just the minor pentatonic scale and we could turn that in, excuse me, to a single course. Maybe not really large, but it would demand, you know, a couple hours of good video training and ideas and ways to work that thing to make it sound good. Forget the chords that go with it. Even forget the notes for a moment. You're just working on technique to try to make this thing sound real world bluesy. I could put a whole course together just on that. So you're just grabbing a little chunk. Inevitably something attracts your brain and you want to move forward with that. That's how you do it. Yes, Tony, I say that a memory would come in handy. Well, maybe you're trying to remember too much because you know deep in the back of your mind that there is a lot to it. I don't need these on now. That there is a lot to it. And then you're overwhelmed and then you're pissed off because you can't hold it in your mind. I mean, that would suck for sure. But you're going about it the wrong way if that's what's happening. You have you can only incorporate little elements at a time. And if that's not if that doesn't satisfy you at some level, then yes, I know I just touched my eyes, but I wash my hands a lot. If you can't take one new minuscule element and then incorporate it into what you're already doing to make what you're doing sound a little different, you're kind of missing the point. Instead of coming to it thinking, oh, I have to learn how to bend and I have to learn how to slide. And no, you start with the scale, you get that undertow. I had one guy tell me a good reference to know it well is that, let me turn that down because I'm peeking out again, is you should be able to play it in the dark, in a cold shower with one hand tied behind your back. So there should be no thought for this particular shape for you to move through. Step one. Step two is, okay, stop playing the whole thing. Let's go to the top 2, 3, 4 strings. Let's hang there for a bit and let's think about, hey, we just talked about this flat 5 thing. Okay, I'm going to start using that a lot. Let me get, this is in my way right now. Right over here. Yep, that'll work. So, you know. Maybe bend to it. And you do that. You do that a lot. And you come up with all kinds of cool, creative ways to manipulate it. That's what you do. But if you don't stay on it long enough and you go and try to incorporate another element, you're overloading your circuitry. And before you know it, you feel like there's just so much to learn and you're never going to hold any of it. Then you're overwhelmed. Then you have to stop looking on YouTube for all the answers. Yes, I know I'm on YouTube. But in terms of its general structure, things are generally, here's one lesson on this, here's one lesson on that, here's one lesson on that. You guys know by now, my game is to connect things together. generally speaking, there's always a theme of connection going on, so that you have a better understanding where things are coming from. So if you're having trouble with that, you need to go back to my website and you need to spend some time there. It's not fully built out because I am rebranding it, but I think if you go through what's there already, you'll get a very clear idea of how this is going to play out over time, so that more players are more aware of how one thing they learned, like where did the flat five come from? Why did that happen? Nobody woke up and said, today I'm going to invent a new note. I'm going to call it the flat fifth and I'm going to put it right here. That never happened. Things are happening because things happened before it. So we need to keep putting things in context. And I find in general, that's not how stuff gets presented. Not just through, online stuff, but in general. It's just, it's there. When I was learning to drive a standard, person that was teaching me just said, just push the clutch in and let the gas go. Okay, well that didn't work. Just stalled the car all the time. What he didn't say is, as one goes in, gently bring the other out, and you'll find that sweet spot where they kind of grab, and you got to pay attention to that, and you got to understand what's happening under the engine in terms of the transmission. But no, just pull that out and push that in. That's kind of like how lessons are being done, and they shouldn't be done that way. I think you deserve to have connection. You deserve to have better content that says, if you do this well, now you're ready to do this. If you do that well, now you're ready to do that. But guitarists don't do that. They jump from minor pentatonic to wanting to play like Joe Satriani in a month. Well, number one, it's not going to happen. Number two, that's a very disrespectful thing to assume on Joe Satriani's end, that it only took him a month to do that. He's been doing this for, I don't know, 35, 40 years. Always getting better because he got really good at stuff before it and then he added to it. That's the way to do it. Okay, well, I'm way over. I got to let you guys go. I got to eat something and clear my throat. How do you remember? Yes, Tony, I say that. Okay. So I'll be back on Monday. And I think what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and do a little bit of minor blues on Monday. Again, I know you guys are full of a lot of information that you've picked up along the way, but a lot of it doesn't matter at this level. And if at this level you can't play yet, you can't work this thing and make it sound good and bluesy, who cares about modes? Who cares about whatever it is that's in your brain that's just extra stuff that you've picked up? You don't need it yet. It will come in handy at some point, but probably not right now. So, okay, I'm going to let you guys go. Listen, thanks so much for hanging with me. You tend to stick around longer than I expect, and I very much appreciate that. Like I said, I hope we can get through this thing quicker than everybody's telling us. But in the meantime, pay attention, do the right thing, stay healthy. I'm thinking about you, and I'll see you on Monday. I'll probably do minor blues, unless y'all send me something more that you'd like me to work on. So, till then, Steve Dempster, Dempster Guitar Studio. Have yourself a great weekend. Stay well. Cheers.